Hello and welcome to the Cold Coffee Club, a podcast brought to you by Houston Moms. We're here to give you a little bit of that mom-to-mom connection, fun, and conversation amidst all the chaos. Join us as we take a break from doing all the things and explore the wide spectrum of this crazy motherhood role. We'll interview fun guests, talk about cool grown-up topics, laugh, share, and grow together. So go ahead, reheat that coffee, and put your feet up. Here we go.
Good morning, Cold Coffee Club. Ashley here. So excited to do another episode with y'all. Today, we're going to be digging into some of the best and worst advice we've either been given or given to others. I'll be joined by Tiffany Harris, and she and I are going to chat all about advice, what advice we do or are willing to give, what advice we kind of stay out of. Like, I'm not even going to say anything about this. We're going to dig into all of that. So stay tuned. But before we do that, of course, let's spill some tea. So we just had the Super Bowl on Sunday, and, part of me really wishes I had hosted a Super Bowl party. I love hosting events, and I think it's always kind of fun having people over. But I kept it really low-key this year, and I didn't host anything. It was just me and the boys, so I made some snacks, some chips and queso, pigs in a blanket, some of my famous dips. But also, I revisited a recipe that I haven't used in a couple years now, and it is so good. These are Antipasto Egg Rolls. Amazing. I will put the recipe in the show notes. They're amazing. Ridiculous. They were so good. And they're really simple. I put in some ham, some salami, some pepperoni, and then peppercini peppers, mozzarella cheese, rolled them up in the egg roll wrappers, fried them, sprinkled some Parmesan cheese on top and some parsley just to make it pretty. And then you dip them in Italian dressing. Mwah! Chef's kiss. Love it. They're amazing. And my kids devoured them, and definitely use that recipe for your upcoming hosting events that you might be having. They are a hit. All right, so for my fail, we are going to have a little bit of girl talk. If you have kiddos who are listening with you, you might want to either pause and come back to this later, or skip it for now and come back later, or turn down the volume, put it in your ears. We're having girl talk now. So I'll give you a minute to get yourselves together. All right, so I have always been a fan of the birth control pill. It has always worked well for me. I got on birth control as a teenager, mainly because I'm a migraine sufferer, and we finally narrowed it down to it was hormone related. I used to get them every month. They would sync up with my cycle, so I would get one when I was ovulating. It was the worst, and I would get them every month it started when I was 12, and I didn't get on birth control till I was 16 or 17. So I was just dealing with it every month and having to take time out of school to deal with it. It was exhausting. So I'd always been on birth control, and I started to wonder, now that I'm, in my mid 30s, that, what are the lasting effects of birth control, this synthetic hormones that we're putting in our bodies. I started to wonder if this is something I want to do long term. And I really considered the fact that, I'm exposing myself to birth control 365 days a year. I don't need it. I don't have use for birth control 365 days a year, if you catch my drift. So I really was wondering, is this worth it? Is this the route I really need to be taking? And I know that there are lots of birth control options. Not all of them are hormone related. But for someone like me who doesn't really want a device in my body all the time, unless I have to, which I don't, and I don't want to be, taking hormones, of course. And, Texas is, I'm not going to get political, but Texas is not a state where it is opportune at all to have an unplanned pregnancy. So I want to make sure that I'm finding the best options for myself. So I found these. They are called VCF Vaginal Contraceptive Gels. I'm not sure if you can see that on my screen because my background is blurred. But these are contraceptive gels. They're filled with spermicide. It's basically a tube that's shaped like a tampon, and they're so easy. You use them before the deed, and then protects you from pregnancy. Now, you can use these with or without condoms. So if you wanted to double up, that makes so much sense. Protect yourself, protect your body, keep yourself safe. 100% recommend, pairing them with condoms. It really just depends on what your situation is, and that's totally fine. That's all on you, but I would highly recommend these. It's totally up to you how you use them, but they're good for an hour. So you use it, you insert it, use the gel. It's good for an hour, and you would need to use another one if you go longer than an hour, and then you're good. And I love that this is an option that's out there if that's where you are in life, where you can just use something like that and call it a day. I love that this is out there, and I don't think people talk about it enough, that there's another option that is readily available. And birth control can get pretty expensive. This box of 10 applicators cost about $11. Love it. That's amazing. And I just think we need to know as many options as we can. If you're like me, don't want to be using hormones, this is hormone-free. It's highly recommended by my gynecologist. She's like, yeah, you didn't know this was out there for you? And I'm like, I had no idea. No one told me, but thank you. Knowledge is power. And I feel like this is something that slipped under my radar, and maybe it slipped under yours as well. And I just feel like it's a great kind of old school method of birth control if that's the route you want to take. So I'm going to advocate for it. That's my tea. My fail, though, is that, I'm sick of birth control, but it actually turned into a win. So it's only wins today. I love it. It's perfect. Now we're done with all the sex talk. Now you can bring the kids back in.
Hey, Houston, I want to hear from you. Would you like to be a guest on the Cold Coffee Club? Send me a message at thecoldcoffeeclubhm@gmail.com. That's thecoldcoffeeclubhm, like Houston Moms, @gmail.com. Can't wait to hear from you.
For my cream and sugar, I am going to recommend all of the wrestling clubs in the Houston area. My kids just recently started wrestling, and it has been a godsend for us. They are, first of all, they're burning off so much energy, but they are having so much fun and learning techniques that they're really fascinated by, and they're having a great time. They are really there just to help the kids. They are so focused and tuned in to the athletes that they're helping create, and we've only been doing it a little over a month, and I'm loving it. So I'm going to shout out a few wrestling clubs in the Houston area, and I just think they're all incredible. And I think if you're looking for an outlet for your kids, something it's a fun skill. It's very fun watching them do it. They're not trying to hurt each other, but they're using their body weight and strength to wrestle other kids, and it's fascinating to me. I love it. I love that they're not punching anything, punching anyone. I think it's fun, and I think it's really interesting to be watching. There's just so many around the Houston area, and I didn't realize how big wrestling was to Houston in general. I didn't realize that so many of my friends and acquaintances were either their kids were wrestlers, or they grew up wrestlers, or they coach wrestling. I didn't realize that it was so prevalent in Houston, and I'm loving it. I'm having so much fun, and now I'm just excited to see if my kids are gonna go to competitions anytime soon. I'm just yeah, I'm full on wrestling mom now, and I like it. I like it a lot. Let's jump into my chat with Tiffany. We are going to delve into some advice we've gotten over the years, some either good advice or bad advice, and then we're going to talk about just how we approach giving advice to others. So check that out. Okay, Cold Coffee Club, we are talking about the best and worst advice we have either received or sometimes given. I know that I have given some terrible advice here and there, but we're going to talk it over. So I'm here with Tiffany Harris, and I'll give her a second just to tell us a little bit about herself for those of y'all who are new to the Cold Coffee Club, and then we'll jump right in. So Tiffany, tell us a little bit about yourself real quick, and reintroduce yourself to our audience.
Absolutely. Hello, Cold Coffee Club. Excuse me. I'm Tiffany Harris, and I'm a writer with one of the blog writers with Houston Moms. I am a mother of twins, 7-year-olds, a boy and a girl. I live here in Houston. I am pretty close to calling this the permanent home since I'm coming up on my 13th year here. Is that right? 13th year. And what else? I love travel. I have a couple of really great travel plans coming up, and I've been working with Houston Moms for 2 years now, so it's been very exciting.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. So let's start on the low note. We're going to end on our highs, on our really good advice. So
I don't know. I have a story. And
I'm
even
so
the
ready.
The best advice is going to be it's going to start well.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm here for it. So for starters, some of my bad advice that I've gotten is don't go to bed angry in a marriage. And for me, that did not sit well because sometimes you just need to go to bed and shut up. Like if you're having all those feelings, you might just need to go to sleep and sleep on it and not talk anymore, because I'm telling you, I tried real hard in the first years of my marriage to not go to sleep angry, and I feel like I did more damage than good. I'm like, why didn't somebody just tell me shut up and go to bed?
Look, I am one of those people. I have got to talk it out. I hate going to sleep with unresolved stuff. And I think maybe that's where that comes from, is a person's and it was probably just one person who said it. It probably wasn't even a whole camp of people who agreed with that person.
Right.
And that's what we were all then told from that.
Yes.
It was just one person who doesn't like to leave things unresolved.
Sure. And I am all for finding a stopping point, let's agree to disagree for now, but do we need to really hash it out? And then all of a sudden you're kind of tired and talking too much, and then you're switching to different tangents, and by the way, your mother, we weren't even talking about that. So if I had just taken a moment to just shut up and go to bed, find that stopping point and drop it for now, I feel like that would have been better for everybody.
I think I may take that advice, because I am.
It's hard. It is so hard.
And I think it's hard because when you have kids and you don't want to argue in front of kids, the evening is the time where you have to kind of get things taken care of.
True. That's very true.
And you guys have to kind of go into the situation saying, okay, we're going to get this to a point, and if we haven't resolved it by this point, then we're going to address it later.
Right. Yeah, and that kind of piggybacks to me on something else, is that the advice of not fighting in front of the kids. So yes, I get that, but knowing how to fight fair and fight appropriately, I feel like is necessary for my kids to see the conflict and how we respect each other, how we might be on opposing sides, but we come together, collaborate, we are kind to each other, we resolve it. I have always been a huge advocate for fighting in front of the kids if we're going to fight fair, if we're going to be respectful. Now, if it's knock down, drag out, and you're calling me out my name, okay, wait a minute.
You shouldn't be arguing anyway.
Right. So what's some bad advice you've gotten or given?
So I'm just going to say this for all the women and even all the men, for the bad advice that I've been given. Anything and everything to do with dating. Everybody should just not give advice on this.
Yep.
Period. Yep. Personally, so it's one thing to say, have an approach or your own perspective about what worked for you for dating. But when I was in my 20s, when I tell you all the unhelpful advice that I got around dating, I could shut everyone up. I remember someone telling me, and it was still, and people, I don't know, in your mind's eye, you want to say they're doing it from a good place. I don't know that that's even true. Because I remember someone saying, oh yeah, you need to get, start dating and finding someone and then getting married. And I was like, but, and then what?
Yeah.
What's after that?
Yeah.
And I was like, and I had the self-awareness kind of as I was approaching my mid-20s that I didn't even know myself enough to really want to start thinking about marriage. And so the pressure that people were trying to apply to me was just so bad. And so unproductive. And it really did come from, and it wasn't really friends, because my friends were very respectable, because we were all out there doing what we were doing anyway. So nobody was on that page.
Right.
But family's friends, and all of us. I just think everybody should just shut up. Just be quiet.
Oh, yes.
Be quiet. I mean, even now in my 40s, and I have friends that are singles in their 40s, I don't give them any advice. Like, the only thing I'm really trying to do is, if I see a cute guy, I try to hook them up. I don't even ask about that. I don't even, like, once the number or the exchange happens, I don't ask any questions after that. I don't be like, how did it go? Did you follow up? What happened? If you want to tell me, great. If you don't, because it's honestly none of my business.
Right.
Same thing with guys. Like, I just did it. A friend of mine, a family friend of mine, asked for a person's number, a woman's number. I gave it to him. I don't ask no questions, because it's none of my business.
My work is done.
It's none of my business. It's not my job to interrogate you and tell you what you need to do. I literally had a family member tell me that I was coming on too strong. My mom would it was just a mess. It was, and then I think the only time you really need to get involved as a family member or a friend is if you feel like your friend is in danger.
Yes.
Like literal danger.
Yep.
Like emotional danger, mental danger, physical danger. That's the only time you really need to be, as a person, getting involved. Like, I have not liked all of my friends' boyfriends or, partners or whatever. And it's really none of my business. Yeah. So I may not think that person's cool, but I'm not the person with them.
Right.
So, all advice around dating, I think we should be more supportive of each other, loving each other, caring for each other, because it is hard.
It is.
Finding a person who you like and that likes you back and that will call you back and communicate with you and that you can have a good time with. That's a hard thing to find.
Yes.
At times.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're in that age where you're still trying to figure out yourself. So,
Exactly.
All advice related to dating. I say all that to say all advice related to dating was all the bad advice I could have had and then some.
Amen. I think back to my young adult years, and one set of advice that I received was that your only options are college or military. That's what you need to be doing. That's what the options are. And it was so limiting, and I wish someone had given me the advice like, hey, take a gap year. Hey, trade schools are incredible. And like, I look at my kids and I'm like, you don't have to go to college. There are so many other options. And I like look at my student loan debt and I'm like, I wish I knew there were other options or things to look into or routes to take that no one mentioned to me. I knew I didn't want to go into the military. And so I thought the only other option was college. And in retrospect, I just really wish someone had encouraged me to consider all other options. It's a hard pill to swallow because I feel like I could have done so many other things if I knew better. So raising my own children, I'm like, there are lots of options. College is a great option for some people if that's the route you want to go, but there are so many roadways to a great future other than college. So that I feel like I put in my worst advice list, but also, I mean, things panned out well for me and I'm thankful, the experiences that I had in college, and I probably wouldn't have had those experiences otherwise, but I just wish I knew that there were more options.
For sure. I mean, and I remember even realizing about midway through, when I was in college, I turned down an opportunity to do, like one of those secondments or like going away to be in a different country.
Yeah.
And I turned it down. It was in Japan. And I turned it down because it was going to, quote unquote, this is how I rationalize, delayed my graduation.
Yep.
Why did I care about that? Yep. Why did I care about that?
We had this ridiculous timeline in mind. I did the same thing. I'm like, what?
Why did you do that? It was going to be fully paid for. I would have even traveled with someone that I knew that I could have become really great friends with. And I turned it down because it was going to push me back like a whole semester. And that was literally my justification for it. And I look back on that and I kick myself because I remember making it then to Hawaii for my when we got married for our honeymoon. That was the first time I had been to Hawaii, 2013. I was like, what took me so long to get here? Like, what was I doing during my life for these last 20 years or 15 years that kept me from seeing a beautiful place like that? Yeah. And it was the timeline.
Yep. It's amazing how we get stuck in those, this is what I'm supposed to do. Yes. It's amazing. And it's very hard to break away from that unless you are just this free-spirited person, which I am not. I am like a cookie cutter, like stick with the timeline. Like this is what we're supposed to do, which, is why I got married when I did, had kids when I did. And now, in the end, I'm divorced. So I guess sticking with a timeline that everyone says you're supposed to stick with might not be the best course of action, but you live and learn.
I was literally like 4 years in college. I thought I was going to go and start working, but I went to grad school. And I don't know if you've heard about this, is the quarter life crisis.
Yes.
Did you experience that?
Yes.
I had the quarter life crisis. My funny story is I was literally, I think over my 26th birthday, crying in my cake. Like if you could imagine, and my mom always got me a beautiful cake. And I am sitting there, candles lit, time to make a wish, and I'm literally crying. And at the time, my brother had to be like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old. I think I got the math wrong, but he was sitting there like patting and rubbing my back because I was crying.
Oh gosh.
And
yeah,
it was awful.
Yeah.
It was so awful. But so yeah, I'm with you. It's like you have to give your kids, it is our goal, like to give our kids more permission to be more expressive with what they want to do. Because at the end of the day, it's just adulthood.
Yeah.
It's just adulthood. Like when I started working and I realized who I was, I worked with someone, they had a hole in their car, literally in the bottom of their car. They were engineers making $80,000 a year. They were driving around in a car that had a hole in the bottom of their car. And I was like, what did I race to? Like, is this the finish line?
Right?
Yup.
I was like, I could be doing anything else right now. And I'm working with people who think it's cool to drive around with a hole at the bottom of their car.
You know. It is what it is. What's some other advice, some bad advice that you've either given or received?
Bad advice that I've given. I try not to. It don't be my business, so I try not to give bad advice.
Right.
I don't know. I think, I really try not to give bad advice. For my friends, I think people see me as kind of an uplifting type of person. So I really am. I think because I've had boundaries violated for so much by different people who felt, intentional, who felt like it was okay to do that. I try to be respectful. I'm sure somebody who will listen to this and be like, girl, I got a time for you when you give some really bad advice. So maybe somebody will have to have a conversation with me to check me.
Right.
But a cousin of mine, I remember, so one thing that I had to grow out of for sure is because I was raised in this kind of linear way and thinking there was a very linear path, and then the way you got to that path was being a particular kind of way. And I remember I told a cousin, that I didn't think she was going to like achieve something because she wasn't really following this linear path. And I'm always regretful of that because she did just fine. Like, as it turns out, again, like there's no one right way to whatever destination you're headed to. And in hindsight, I realized that I was projecting onto her what I was experiencing and feeling and thinking that was, thinking that was right at the time. Yeah. Still not having any idea at the time that it was not the right way to be moving around in my life. Yeah. But I remember I did project that on her and said that out loud to her. And she kind of responded the same way that I would have in the moment. Like, who are you? Who are you to tell me that? Right. And she was right. Yeah. So that was definitely a bad piece of advice I gave, and more so projected. I think it was like really just projecting on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think most of the time we all mean well when, someone comes to us and is like, what should or what do you think about? And I remember giving someone advice and not really thinking about the choice of words, but realizing later that probably was not helpful. But I literally just said to someone, stop worrying. Just don't worry about it. And it was such it could go two ways. It could be just so useless. Like, that didn't help me at all. Stop worrying. Like, okay, thanks. But also, like, when I think about it, it's like, okay, well, that was kind of invalidating. Like, clearly they have reason to be worrying and a little bit stressed out. And I in retrospect, it's like, okay, well, that probably didn't feel very helpful to receive. And a lot of times we don't think about, hey, what this simple phrase that you're saying to someone could really mean something. They could either feel super alone now, or they're worried, like, okay, well, now I think I'm being ridiculous because you're telling me stop worrying, so now maybe I'm just being ridiculous. And so just thinking about, like, granted, we're all trying to give the best advice we can. If someone comes to us and asks, like, what do you think about A, B, and C, trying to actually give them a response is probably what they're hoping for. Stop worrying. It's not really going to help.
Well, it's like even how we as parents tell our kids sometimes when we feel like they're being extreme. Yes. And we stop feeling that particular emotion, right?
Right.
And so I was just telling this to my sister literally because your child breaks apart, right? So they have that moment, and then it goes on, and then there's a moment where you're like, okay, you need to pull yourself back, like right. And I've tried different ways to say, stop feeling what you're feeling. That's not really what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to say, like, figure out a way in this moment to get past this, because we have resolved it. It is resolved. And now you're carrying it forward as if now it's still bothering you. And I get it if it is, but can we figure out a way to move past it?
Yeah, exactly. Can we figure out a way, please?
Yes. But the moaning on the couch is not helping right now.
Right, exactly. This is not helpful. So switching gears to probably the best advice we've gotten, like for me personally, one that I have received was, instead of telling my kids be careful, which is kind of a habit of parenting, like be careful, whoa, instead tell them pay attention. And that really changes so much of the messaging that you're telling them, because one is telling them, be fearful. This is scary. Be careful. But the other is really like, hey, you're in control. Pay attention though. Like, look around, look at what you're doing, and make the best choice for yourself. It's really more empowering of your kids. And when someone brought that to my attention, I was like, done deal. Like, that makes so much sense. Pay attention. And I have loved using that with my kids especially as they've gotten older. Pay attention to what type of friend you're hanging out with. Pay attention to what kind of words that person uses, instead of, ooh, be careful of that kid, they seem like a problem. Totally different approach, and I have enjoyed it. I've loved it.
Yeah. I heard that too. When my kids were small, we listened to like a podcast or something, And they were saying the worst thing you can say to your kid is to be careful, because kids are naturally going to be careful. Like it did not occur to me before having kids that we all have a survival instinct. So kids, even kids as careless as they can seem, they are actually being as careful as they know how to be.
Sure.
And so it was like more so like, remember that step is further down than you think. Make sure you look down to see how far it is. So I definitely, I still used to be careful. I do.
Yeah.
But when I catch myself, I then try to be more specific about what it is I'm telling them to be careful about.
Yeah.
So they're like, the more specific that you can tell them, the more that they will then pay attention to that thing, as opposed to this like generalized idea of being careful. And
right.
Like, yeah, lady, I got it.
Like, duh. Yeah, I'm trying.
No doubt on that one.
What's some other good advice that you've gotten over the years?
So I'm going to start with one that I received, and it actually came from a not so great place, at least from the people who said it to me. But it was definitely something that I would say was helpful to me. And the way I listened to it is the way I then have tried to take on advice, is that it came from people who were not like looking after my best intentions. So again, this is family members. A small known fact about me is that I graduated a year early. So I graduated high school at 16 years old. And I had an older cousin that I spent a lot of time with, and he was with someone, and they were kind of cackling, and I was in the car about the fact that like I likely would not be successful going to college because I was only just smart. And they were like, oh, well, you're going to be better because, you know, Tiffany isn't street smart. She doesn't have common sense. And then they like high-fived and laughed and cackled about that. And I was like, so as a smart person, I was like, I listened to that, right? I listened and I heard it. And I was like, oh, well, if I just need to learn common sense, then I can learn common sense. So I can be, you know, book smart and street smart, which is learning common sense. And then I will, you know, proceed in life. And I did. So I say that to say that it was really good advice at the time, because had I not heard that advice, had I not heard them say that to me, I may not have gotten that, you know, that kind of street smartness that I needed to pick up. And that really was very much a saving grace for me as I proceeded through life, because then I really had to learn, I had to listen to people, pay attention, really ask questions. I did that anyway, but not from a kind of a survival instinct. Perspective. So it was really, that was not their intention. It was definitely not their intention.
Right.
But it was really good to have heard. And sometimes you have to, I say to people, you have to be willing to pick up advice and information, even when it's coming from a negative place from people. Right. So there are still gems in what people are saying about you or to you, even when it's coming from a negative place. You have to have the maturity to be able to pick those up along the way. It's just like someone saying, oh, I don't pick up pennies. Well, pennies are important because it's money. When you pick up enough of them, you got money. And that's what those pieces of advice are for me. And I picked up a couple. I mean, I really have along the way. And that was one of the first I remember that really came from a very negative place, but I leveraged and used. And I always remember that. You know, I remember I took that with me through college. Like I literally took that advice with me through college. And it's not to say I didn't make mistakes.
Right.
It's starting to rain over here too.
I know. It is pouring over here. It just suddenly started.
Yeah,
goodness.
I can see it out my window.
Oh my gosh.
But so that was a piece of advice that was not meant for my good, but I went on ahead and took it and made it my good.
Yeah, good for you. That's you're absolutely right about it takes maturity to see the gems in there, even though it was coming from it was packaged in a very negative way, but you found a way to turn that for your own good. That's amazing. That's awesome.
This was one I actually just heard from another podcast. It's called, so I will shout them out. I think it's called The Real Relationships, or Real Relationships, and it's REAL.
Okay.
And the husband in the group said, you don't live with your choices, you live with your consequences. And I have been saying that now to my kids, Ashley. But I say, I have been saying it now for the last month as if I came up with it myself, which I didn't.
They don't need to know that.
Well, and I have been telling them, like, hey, remember, like, you're not responsible. You are responsible for your choices. But he broke it down further to say, you don't live with your choices. You live with your consequences. And that was really powerful to me because it is what you live with. You can make a choice, and then there are consequences after. And I would say that, like, you have to be okay with the consequences. But I break it when I heard that. When I tell you, I use that at every given moment.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
I was just telling it to my brother, and he gave it to somebody else. It's been
and now you've given it to me. I'm about to turn it around on my children. I love this.
Yes, because it's
That's
like
great.
any little thing. I mean, they were a week ago, they were up on their iPads looking at something they weren't supposed to. And I said, so what you about to live with? The consequences. You're about to live with these. And when I say now, they don't have a problem with it because they understand. Like, if I am clear on what you're not supposed to do, then, and you do it anyway, then you're gonna be okay with these consequences and not cry about it, not complain about it, nothing. And we took their pads away. I haven't heard a bit about it.
It's so fascinating how kids operate, how when you come to them with logic, a lot of times when they've reached a certain stage, a lot of times they get it. They're like, well, that makes sense. That tracks.
That makes sense. I knew I wasn't supposed to be looking at it.
Right. It's amazing how eventually there's a point where it clicks and you don't even have to explain it anymore. It's like, well, this is done now. And they're just like, yeah, all right. She's got me there.
and I didn't even have to get upset. So there was no yelling, there was no loud voices, nothing. I mean, another story. My son just broke our TV in our bedroom.
Oh no.
And it's okay. It's okay. We just got to replace the TV. He didn't break himself. It was nothing of value, like nothing of personal value to me. And he was so upset about it. He was so upset. He's like, you're going to have to get it replaced. And he was so upset about it. And I was like, it's okay. Now, we're not going to get it replaced anytime soon because we have other priorities, right? And now he has to deal with the consequence of maybe not being able to go upstairs and watch TV like he wanted to. And it was legitimately an accident. Right? But even now he sees this is even how accidents can have unintended consequences.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And you're now living with the consequence of mom saying, well, I wasn't planning on spending that $1,200 today. I'm not going to spend that $1,200 today, and we'll spend it when we have to. But it's not today, and it won't be tomorrow or next month for that matter.
Right.
So it is. To me, it's a very structured way of like living by example.
Yes. That's amazing. And knowing that you recognizing that, hey, it was an accident, so I'm not going to scream and yell at you or make you feel bad. It was an accident. I get it. But there are some unintended consequences with that. Accidents happen, yes, but I mean, I hope we learned something. Don't do that again.
Don't do that again. And I hope it's things like that when they're in situations with friends and when we're not around, they're like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Let me get myself up out of here.
Yes.
Oh, I love it.
I don't want any unintended consequences.
Exactly. I hope they think like that. That is, I love it. One piece of advice that I did receive back before I was married, and we did not do a very good job at keeping this in the forefront. So hoping that if I ever get married again, this is how we approach things. Marriage is not 50-50, or at least it's not always going to be 50-50. It might be on a random Wednesday, but Thursday, it could be 75-25. And I think if people really understood that, A, relationships don't have to be transactional. Like, you do this, so I do this. Thank you. Like, I'm only going to do this because you did this. Being a giver in a relationship, being focused on like, how can I serve you, so then in turn you want to also serve me, and realizing that you have to give as much as needed at a certain time, and when you need to take what you need to take, but it's not always going to be balanced. And I think a lot of relationships are very much like, you play your role and I play mine, and we both do 50-50, and that's how it's always going to be. It's not always going to be that way, and you have to marry someone and align yourself with someone who is willing to go the extra mile if I just can't today, or I'm willing to go the extra mile because you can't today. I really think if that was on the forefront in my marriage, we would not be where we are now.
Have you heard Brene Brown's take on it?
No.
She has a take on it, which I do love, and I haven't really brought it to my husband because we somewhat act like this, but she looks at it more like the combination has to be 100. So some days it will be very much 50-50, but there could be days where you're having a really bad day and you have 30. And then if your husband or partner has a bad day too, and he only has 30, that's 60. So now you guys have to figure out, with the missing 40, how to compensate.
Yes.
Like how to not be snipping at each other, sniping at each other, being mean to each other, and figuring out how to compensate for that missing amount, and being intentional with how you communicate with each other and interact with each other. Because some days it doesn't come up to 100. Like neither of you have a total of 100. Yeah. But if there's days where you have 80 and he only has 10, or you have 80 and he only has 20, well then now you're okay, right? Yeah. Like you have enough to care, because the goal is to mutually together have 100, as opposed to somebody having 50 and another person always expected to have 50.
Right. And it that mentality really just negates the whole idea of just being a team and being a unit together. Having that expectation of your person, you better always perform your 50%, always. And if I'm having a bad day, pick up my slack. No, let's work together to make sure that everyone is getting what they need. I loved that advice when I heard it. Apparently we didn't hear it well enough. But lessons learned, it is hard. And remembering to give your partner grace, and to also just be grateful. Like, having gratitude for your person is a big deal, and that's something I think we dropped the ball. We both dropped the ball on that one. So, if I ever get married again, I want to keep that in the forefront. I'm like, yes, it doesn't always have to be even.
Yes. So what's some best advice that you've ever given anyone else?
Because of especially now being divorced, I feel like I've given some good advice as far as like, hey, being on the other side of it, I can see where I misstepped. And really, I think, for my newlywed friends, I've encouraged them to take a break from social media during their first year of marriage. I have mentioned this to a few people, and I actually got the idea from the person that I'm dating now, and he mentioned, when I get married, I think maybe social media is part of the problem, why people are having like a hard time just really enjoying where they are in their lives. And so then when I thought about that, I was like, tell people, hey, if you want some advice, if you come to me for advice, I'm going to encourage you to take some time off of social media. And it has seemed to pan out very well for the people that I have told about it. I'm like, just enjoy being in your moment. That first year of marriage is so important, and it's such like a special time, and you don't get that time back. So really just be in that together. If you want to, consider just stepping back a little bit, because social media is full of so much stuff that does nobody any good, really. It's great for some things, yes, but it is very easy to fog your mind with all that stuff. Really just enjoy where you are in your new marriage. And it seems to help people. And I wish I had considered taking that approach. But also, you know, I got married when I already had a 2-year-old. We had a 2-year-old together. So, I mean, I don't know if we would have fully been just like engulfed in our marriage, in our first year of marriage. We're raising a kid. We got Gymboree class to go to. We got stuff going on. But just really taking that time to enjoy where you are.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's good advice. That is good advice.
Thanks.
Because they have said that social media in particular is false advertising.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Everyone is just showing the highlight reels for the most part. I truly appreciate the people who are keeping it real on social media. They are out there and you have to dig, but they are out there and they are the best.
I saw a highlight reel and I just said to myself, that's not real, lady. You can't tell me that's real.
Right.
Now you are showing the highlights, but
Yes.
you should call this what it is, the highlight reel of something bad happened and you got to the other side. Like there was a part in there that was probably pretty ugly and you haven't shown that part.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Yeah.
That's a really good advice.
What about you? What is the best advice you've ever given?
So my best advice that I give to like my brother and to my kids and even just to anyone is just be your best self.
Mm-hmm.
So I always say that my brother was like kind of my first kid because he's 17 years younger than me.
Yeah.
And so as he matured, I had to figure out what to say to him that would, where again, when he's out there in the world making choices, what do I want him to be left with in terms of how to make choices? And it's to be your best self.
Yeah.
And so anytime I got out of, like, if we were talking or if I saw him and I was, I would go away and I would just say, be your best self, Tyler, be your best self. And he is so funny because I just said it out of instinct of not knowing what else to say to him. And he now says that to my kids.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Older than they are now. So when he sees them, he hangs up the phone and he's like, be your best self. And I was like,
oh, that's so meaningful. Like it stuck with him. And now that is precious. I love it.
I said it to my kids as I went out of town last week or a couple of weeks ago, and I was sitting next to a lady, and that's what I said to my kids because they were on their way to school. And she was like, that's so precious. She said, I wasn't trying to listen to your call, but that's just so precious what you said to them. And I was just like, and it was just literally, Ashley, I promise you, I didn't read it somewhere.
Yeah.
I didn't know what else to say to him.
Yeah.
To make him think about how to make good choices. Because I didn't have you're left with your consequences.
Right.
You're left with your consequences. I didn't have that at 20-some years old. So
right.
I had be your best self.
Yep.
And so, yeah. And I'm happy, I'm thankful that he has. Like he's obviously made choices that I don't even know about, but he's certainly living up to trying to be his best self and being his best self. So that's what I'm really proud of.
That's amazing. I love that. That is perfect to wrap on. Be your best self.
Yes.
Perfect. It's so simple, but it says everything. It says it all.
It says it all. It says it all. I do encourage the audience. Be your best self.
Yes.
Not your highlight reel self, not your Instagram self. Not your Facebook self.
No filter, just your best self.
Yes. Not the self you show up to at work.
Yeah.
Just be your best self.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Tiffany. It's always a pleasure. I love when I get to chat with you.
Absolutely. You too.
All right. Perfect. So great to talk to Tiffany. As always, we have so much fun, and it was really funny reminiscing about some of, just preparing for this episode, reminiscing about some of the advice I'd gotten over the years. Where I'm just like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not. And I'm really proud of some of the great advice I've given to people because I feel like I'm just trying to figure it out. And so I'm like, don't ask me for advice. I don't know. But the times that I have offered advice and nailed it, I'm so proud of myself.
So we are well underway with February and Black History Month, and Houston Moms posted a post from Cindy E titled Celebrate Black History Month in Houston. This is just a great compilation of ways that you can acknowledge Black History Month, experience something new to celebrate Black History Month. I highly recommend, celebrating Black history always, all the time. I feel like we don't need a month, but that's irrelevant. If you can really take some time to acknowledge Black History Month and incorporate Black history into your day-to-day life, I think that's incredible. So even this post, if you don't use this post in February, use it at least sometime this year as much as you possibly can. So again, it's just called Celebrate Black History Month in Houston. So while we've just discussed advice and the advice that people have given us or that we've given, I wanted to look into one post on inc.com, inc.com. And it says that psychology says people who give lots of advice secretly want this one thing. And this one thing is power. In this article, it says that these studies have indicated that even if you're not actively out to take the reins over others, giving advice can make you feel like you have some sway, which helps you feel more powerful. And if the idea of more power makes you drool, you're probably more likely to look for opportunities to tell others what to do. Interesting. So giving advice makes people feel powerful, makes them feel like they have some impact and influence on someone else's life. I thought that was really interesting. And I think it's something to consider when you're giving advice. Are you really trying to understand where that person's coming from and maybe offer options based on who they are? Or are you trying to sway them and make them do things the way you would do them? Something to think about. As always, thank you for joining the Cold Coffee Club. Make sure to like and subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And make sure to check out Real Houston Moms on Instagram. Thanks so much and have a great week.
Coffee Club,
bye-bye.
Brought to you by Houston Moms. We wish you a fabulous week with your families and look forward to sharing many more cups of cold coffee with you.